Hello, everybody. As always, please feel free to ask any questions along the way if you're watching live. If you think you might like to come on the show yourself, please do get in contact. My details on the channel's About page. Next week, we'll be talking with Jana Marie Hemsing about various electronics projects, but today's guest is Richard Sewell. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Atty.
How are you doing?
Good, yes. Had a
Good.
complicated day, but everything worked.
Great. Could you introduce yourself quickly and just tell everybody who you are and what you do?
My name is Richard Sewell. Right now, what I mostly do is make giant, inflated, joyful robots. I have, for most of my career, written software, and that's gradually turned into making strange kinds of art robot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So if we start with the beginning of you, you started uni. Did you get all the way through, or how did that sort of progress?
I did a physics degree, which was great. Understand how the universe works and all that. Mm-hmm. And then I did a 1-year MSc in very theoretical computing, which was interesting, but has never really been useful.
Okay.
And then before the end of that, somebody asked me if I could help them with a software problem they had. And I said yes, because, why wouldn't you? And helped them with their problem. I ended up recruiting a couple of friends, and we spent several years making a system for them.
Okay.
They were do you want all the gory details?
Oh, go for it. I'd love to hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
they were a market research company.
Okay.
So they interviewed people in the street about what's your favorite margarine.
Right.
And then they drew lots of charts and presented it to the margarine company. And they processed all their data on a VAX and printed out giant tables on fanfold paper and took them into a room full of little old ladies with pens and rulers who drew charts
okay.
on acetate, physical acetate. And so we made them a thing with a Unix box that talked to the VAX and scraped these reports off it as, just text in rows and columns. And then we had a collection of MS-DOS PCs wired up to it. I think we used apricots, as I recall. Okay. And then each apricot, because you couldn't do graphics on screen, that was far too fancy.
Right.
So each apricot had its own text screen, and then next to it was this massive color CRT sitting on top of a box that did color graphics, which we talked to over, I don't even know, a serial port, I think.
Okay.
And so you could flick through the available reports for the project you're working on and pull out a row or a column and say what kind of chart you wanted, and then we draw you a pie chart or whatever. You can change the labels and the color, all that stuff. Then you press the button, and then a plotter would plot it on an actual acetate.
Amazing.
And they were very happy with it. It revolutionized making this stuff. So it was interesting to do. It took, I don't even know, a year or two. It worked really well. And they said, so we've got this other problem. They did long-running studies. So they would, study all of the margarines. In fact, that was called the yellow fat study.
Right, okay.
Everything that was yellow and you spread on bread. And they did banks and, loads of market sectors. So they had this data that went on for a very long time. And answers to questions, whole questions kept coming and going because, if somebody has a new ad campaign, you have to ask about it, but only for that chunk of time. And so the way they analyzed this was just to literally write code that understood where all these things had come and gone so that they could write analyses that ran over long periods of time, but they still actually got the percentages right. And they could find no software which would do this for them. And they asked if we could do anything to help. So we said yes, because, it's just software, right? We ended up making them a thing which understood all that. So it had its own way for them to specify what what was in it, what was in the questionnaire, how the questionnaire changed. And then you could ask for, any time period, any subset. There was a lot of analytical complications. So you drove it from a command line, and then it spat you out tables and graphs and all that stuff. And that was what they used for, I don't know, maybe 10 years to analyze this data.
Okay. And so that you mentioned questions and things. That's presumably over time, questions become less relevant or go away, but then they might come back again. So were you handling sort of all of the potential mismatch questions and the slightly different answers and things as well?
Yes, absolutely. That was the core of the problem, was handling stuff coming and going. And it's like it didn't. They tried asking sort of database people about it, but it was too undatabasey a problem. And I don't really know if there was any other software then that could have handled it. Clearly, we were not interested in finding other software because we wanted to make it for them. But I've had people talk about the same problem quite recently. I don't know how other people do it now.
Okay.
Certainly then it was a peculiar thing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so what did they move from now that you had the software? What was their old way of doing things?
Well, their old way was literally writing code that understood every single change in the question, in every question.
Wow, okay.
Like knowing that if the time period was this, then sort of the numerator and denominator of the percentage had to be calculated from these and those.
Okay.
But in this other time period, those and these. It was horrible. I mean, it's very hard to maintain.
Fair enough.
And they came from a punch card world.
Right.
Amazingly, they did these surveys on paper, and then they had to get in the computer. And computers were expensive, so what they had were like handheld mechanical card punch machines, and a whole army of home workers who would take home, a stack of paper questionnaires, and a punch card machine and a stack of cards, and they'd come back with the cards. And I don't know how long they went on doing that, but
I guess that harks back to the original meaning of the word computer, which was a person who did maths, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Very good.
So we worked on that system. We built it, and they used it, and they wanted extra bits, and they went on wanting extra stuff for a long time, which was a comfortable but in the end boring living. And then that had sort of tailed off by about 2000 or so. And I went to work with some friends doing some of the tech for a .com startup in London in the final days of the London .com boom of 2000. It was an unsuccessful startup which went bust after spending, I think, 120 million quid. They were going to be, the first great online sportswear retailer,
right?
But they were not.
Yeah, difficult time.
It was interesting to see. I'd never seen. I'd read about that .com world in Word, and I'd never seen it up close. And then I did see it up close. I didn't like it very much.
Right.
Everything was always on fire and a disaster. It was horrible. Some people got very rich, but none of them were me.
Right. Okay.
And I became cynical about the web world after that. But while we were doing that, one of my colleagues there had been writing Palm Pilot apps, selling them, and doing reasonably well from it. And he said, well, we're not doing that anymore because it's all exploded. Should we make a company and make Palm Pilot apps?
Okay.
Which we did. We made our own apps. We did contract apps for people. We wrote an app that was really a kind of yellow sticky app for reminding yourself of things. And then we gave that photos, and then we gave it a way to send photos to other people. And then MMS came along, where you could send photos to people on a telephone. Like,
multimedia messaging, yeah.
Yes, we just changed the transport on this. We didn't have an MMS client.
Okay.
Which we did, and then we So we became Palm's MMS client.
Oh wow! As in you were bundled with the OS.
Yes, we were in the OS,
Brilliant.
and so that kept us busy for a bit. We did MMS so that was for Handspring really. We were MMS because Palm split into Palm and Handspring and then combined again. And so we were the MMS client on the Trios, so kind of flippy Palm with a physical keyboard, and then on some later Palm devices, which again was very interesting to see what it's like working inside those companies. I'd never seen that sort of corporate side of computing.
Okay.
So yes, that was very interesting for a while, and then Palm wasn't a thing. We went on making apps for Windows Mobile and Android and iOS. We avoided Symbian and the weird Nokias. And initially it was a lovely market to be in. You could sort of have a bright idea for something you wanted. Forget somebody else would probably want it. You make an app, you could sell it to people. It was easy to make new stuff. And as time went by, especially since the iPhone appeared, the amount people would pay for an app went down, and the number of people making apps went up.
Right. That's interesting.
It's a very boring market to be in now.
Yeah. And because I know at the moment, a lot of apps are sort of at the £1, $1 or less price point. And was that something that happened pretty quickly? Because before the app stores, it was all boxed software almost, wasn't it?
Yes, it was $30 for an app before the Apple App Store, iTunes Store started doing apps, and then suddenly it was kind of $1.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. And
became
uninteresting. And
yes, well, and we kept doing it. We did contract apps for people and some of our own stuff, and we still do a bit of our own stuff, but in increasingly particular niches.
Okay.
Where you could still do an interesting thing because it's not swamped. But that had kind of tailed off a lot. And I was friends with some people in Bristol. There was a company called Rusty Squid who did lovely artistic robotic puppetry work.
Okay.
And I was friends with them, and I'd helped them with some technology things, and I was always too busy to really be part of a project. And then suddenly I wasn't too busy. Like, I can do some more of this. And so I did some things with them where I was mostly writing software, but also making things. So I'd always made stuff, and by then, Arduinos had arrived, and you could make little robotic things really easily. So I was having fun with that because why wouldn't you? So I did a couple of projects with them. The most interesting was How to Build a Robot, which was a TV program of the making of a robot and then us taking it out in the streets and having people interact with it.
So frustratingly, I've heard about this in the past, and I tried looking it up and things, and it's a little bit difficult to find or impossible maybe to find. But it sounds lovely in many ways, the goals and what you did. So I'd love to hear more.
Yes, I mean, it was lovely to do. Well, I mean, it was hard work to do, but because Rusty Squid had this background in puppetry, they were very good at giving the thing a real feeling of being alive. Right. So if you ask an ordinary person, if you hand them, I don't know, a tea towel, and you say, please make the tea towel angry, mad person. Yeah. If you do that to a puppeteer, they'll show you an angry tea towel. Right?
Okay.
You won't really know why you think it's angry, but you will be quite clear that it is angry. Because that's what puppetry is, right? They've been doing it for, I don't know, 2,000 years. They know how.
Yep.
So they knew all this stuff about how to make your robot more engaging. And we put a lot of that in this robot. So it was sort of, small child sized, built to be held and picked up. It had quite a mobile torso, so it could wiggle about. It had a very mobile head. It had eyes but no mouth, tiny little arms that could just kind of wave. And it breathed a little bit all the time.
Okay.
It went back and forth a little bit, but that's close enough.
Yeah.
It would tend to look at faces, not all the time, but if there was one there, it might end up stuck on the face. And when it was looking at something, if you moved it, the head stayed stuck on whatever it was looking at.
Okay.
If you carried it along, the head bobbed a bit.
And this was all sort of by design, and obviously the moving, the breathing was clearly by design. And working with puppeteers, I guess that sort of gives you the it might be a good idea to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, they go, yes, it should do this, 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 and this. Please make it do that.
Right.
I'm like, all right, I can write some code.
I love it.
It was great. It had a kind of it had a bunch of reflexes, like looking at things and stabilizing its head and breathing and so on. It had a bunch of somewhat scripted behavior and modes in which it would react in different ways. And it had some simple things it could say. And it had a puppeteer remotely who could control that stuff. So they were never, controlling it moment by moment. They could just say, be angry or say this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the puppeteer could see what the robot was seeing, so they could make it do somewhat appropriate things. And it was viscerally persuasive. If you picked it up, you would feel like you'd picked up an alive thing. And that's quite a hard sensation to tell somebody about.
Yeah.
But it really was.
And even for you, having worked on the internals, the software, the proof that it's not alive, it's something that sort of almost fooled you and got you sort of really engaged with it as well. It's amazing.
Yeah. But I don't think it counts as fooling. I think there's a thing about, I think people are very happy to enter into the game of a thing. Right? If you present a pretend or a game or a little make-believe, people don't have to commit to believing it or not believing it to go along with it, right? The believing is not the point.
Yeah.
That's not what they're interested in. It's not like, you're at immigration and going, is this alive or is it a robot?
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of alive. That's lovely. and they will do the thing because you presented an appealing pretend or an appealing thing to do to them, and they're not really interested in whether it's true in a technical sense. That's just not the point. That's
so cool. I love it. That's it's one of those things where from my past, I guess, you think back to the school playground, right, where someone has this robot and it's a robot, but the other kids would tease you, so you try not to sort of engage with it almost. But it sort of feels like people don't mind about that, and they just go with it and interact with it, because why wouldn't you almost?
And I think not just with robots, I mean with pets and other people.
Yeah.
And almost anybody left to their own devices, if they're pushing a shopping trolley along, will at some point lift themselves up and pretend to fly for 5 seconds. Right? They don't go, I'm flying now. They're just having a little game. And so there's this whole world that's in between true and false.
Yeah.
That people are very happy to be in, but don't usually kind of make a big deal of. But that's where people spend a lot of their time. If they're watching a movie, they're not going, this isn't true, it's made up.
Yep.
But they're also not going, this is a documentary.
Yep.
These things actually happen, right? They're just in this pretend world, and people spend a lot of time in that world.
It's very interesting.
But they just sort of don't say it very much.
Yeah. So having suspended reality almost in describing it, can you talk to us a bit more about the internals and what went on behind the scenes? You mentioned there was a puppeteer who had sort of high level control over motions or presentations, that kind of thing. But what else?
So the puppeteer had a tablet PC with an app with a whole bunch of buttons. and some sliders, and they could see some real-time stuff coming back from the robot. And the robot was running its reflexes, and there was a system of kind of, because once you've got multiple reflexes going, you've got to mix the motions in a smart way.
Yep.
And so there's turned out to be some significant complications in how you collect together those motions and make something sensible out of it, and get the transitions in and out sensible. There was a kind of scripting engine that would, if you set it off doing a particular thing, so it had these sequences where it would, say hello and do a motion and say another thing. And those had some randomization in as well, so the puppeteer could use them again and again, and they wouldn't always come out the same.
Okay.
And dear me, there was a lot of stuff in it. There was a whole giant pile of C. It had cap sense, so it knew when you stroked its head.
Okay.
It had some pressure sensing, using literally just pressure sensors and soft silicone tubes, so it knew when somebody was holding it around its middle.
Okay.
It had accelerometer, so it knew which way up it was. If it fell over, it always said "oops" and waved its arms as it fell over.
I love it.
Loads of stuff like that. It was full of stuff, and its mechanics was quite complex. So it had this soft torso, which was foam and strings and a kind of lever mechanism. It had, I think, a 3-servo neck. So there, and there.
Okay.
Which is all you can have for a neck, really.
Yeah.
Raspberry Pi, something doing the motion, some kind of Arduino, I think, doing the motion.
Okay. And was this quite new for Rusty Squid? Was it, typically they'd been string puppets. I don't know what to call it because I'm completely clueless about the field, but was the electronics and the mechatronics, if you want to call it that, was that new to them?
No, they'd done a lot of other things of that nature, but this was more complex and more sophisticated than their previous stuff.
Right.
And all packed into one portable thing, which makes it very hard. The head of this thing was absolutely jammed.
Properly full. Yeah.
Properly full of stuff. Yeah.
Amazing.
It was great. And what we did with it was take it out into Bristol and just leave it somewhere.
Okay.
Like on the pavement or on the table outside a pub. Sometimes we'd hand it to somebody.
Can you look after this?
Found this. Well, wander off. And then we'd all kind of hang about, like trying to look inconspicuous, but out of shot, because there'd be a TV crew there as well,
right.
But long lenses and far away. So just trying to be inconspicuous, keep an eye on it, catch the people afterwards, and see if they'll sign a release form.
Okay.
I spent quite a long time just standing in the dark in my fluffiest coat, freezing cold, watching some people outside a pub doing a thing. But people were very, very engaged. They would tell it long stories.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. With only quite minor prompting, they were very forthcoming with it and very...
And by prompting, you're referring to it doing the prompting, I suppose.
Yes. So it would sometimes say quite simple things like, tell me a story about when you were young, or stuff like that. And people were generally kind to it. And quite often, if somebody had sort of been with it for a bit and they were kind of done with it, they would just sort of hand it on to somebody else that randomly turned up. And then they'd just carry on.
That's amazing.
So
often you're out in public and you feel like everyone is on a mission to get somewhere or do something, or they're in a rush, and it's lovely to hear that people aren't always like that. They'll just hang about and play with a puppet thing, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean it probably depends where you are.
Yeah.
We picked places that mostly worked well. We ran it in a big shopping centre for a while, and that didn't work very well because parents seemed to think like it was a thing to amuse their kids while they went and did something else.
Right. Okay.
And it turns out if you've got a thing and children start playing with it, adults won't go near it because it's for the kids, and that would be embarrassing. It's like, it's a Barbie doll, and that's terrible. So we actually had to deliberately, if the kids had been playing with it for too long, we would go and grab it and say, I'm sorry, we've got to take it away to fix it.
Hide it, yeah.
Not because we had to fix it, but just because we had to sort of reset that situation.
Yeah.
It is really interesting. It's a really strong effect.
So has there been sort of any follow-on studies or research into the slight suspense of reality, or whatever you want to call this? Is that something that you've looked into with the rest of your work and things?
No, I've not read any formal research about that.
Okay.
I've read a bunch of stuff about how people relate to robots, but not really that suspension of seriousness. It's a good question.
Because I've watched a couple of your talks, and it's something that you've mentioned about a couple of your projects, and I really, I don't know, it feels touching, you know, emotional, relatable, etc. And it's very nice.
Yeah, I think if you talk to people from kind of theatre or clowning or something, they would probably have a systematic understanding of it.
Okay.
Maybe I should go chat to them.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, it is.
Okay. So should we talk about some more of your projects then? You've done some sort of installation-y type things.
Yes. So shall we start with the eye?
I'd love to. Go for it.
All right. So this is a thing that me and my friend Ben built for an exhibition in Bristol. So most of the things I've built are too big. But
there we go.
Here's the eye.
Okay.
So it has an eyelid, and then it has an eyeball. Forgive me for touching the eyeball; it doesn't feel quite right. And this terrible serial camera.
Okay.
And all it does is looks at people. It doesn't even look at people. What it does is tracks what is changing in its frame.
Right.
And it looks at the center of gravity of the changing pixels.
Okay.
So if there's one person, it looks at that person. If there are two people moving about, it looks in between them.
Right.
If there's a whole field of moving stuff, then it just doesn't do anything sensible. But sort of in the right situation, it's kind of persuasive. It's
a convincing cheat, I suppose. You know, it.
Yeah. People want to see what it does and play with it for a bit, and it's quite a characteristic sequence that, in fact, you see with a lot of tech art, which is first they see it and they're kind of amazed or interested, then they want to play whatever game it offers them, and then they want to know how it works.
Okay.
And the metric for me is how long is that phase where they're playing the thing that it offers them. By the time they want to know how it works, it's like the interesting bit is done, and now they're just curious about some gizmo they found.
Right.
No, it might as well have been a really nice toaster.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I think for me, the thing to aim for is not an interesting thing, but an interesting experience.
Yep. Okay.
The thing doesn't really matter. The experience is what you're shipping. That's what goes away in somebody's head.
Yep.
Things not the point, although clearly things are lovely. So what's in it is, this is a Christmas tree ornament.
Not quite in camera. Yep,
sorry.
Thank you.
Christmas tree ornament. Your only way to buy white plastic spheres for making eyeballs, available in a variety of sizes, but only at Christmas. So stock up.
Yeah.
And inside is glue gun and ugliness. So there's 3 servos, serial camera down the bottom. That is an embed, which I don't know if it's even still a thing. It had a weird web-based IDE, but it's like a sort of Arduino-y platform. It wasn't even loads of work to write the code for. I mean, the hardest bit was talking to this serial camera.
Right.
Peculiar.
Is that kind of a request a frame, get a frame type situation, or
I
more of an interpreting the image you got back?
I think it just spat bytes at you.
Mhm.
and you had to keep up.
Right.
So it was very illuminating for me because people were very engaged, but only kind of up to a point, and I was very attracted to that. And this was before the Rusty Squid project. Right? This was my first ever kind of making a weird robot thing for people to play with. So I guess the logical success to that would be the giant staring eye.
Please do.
Shall we show the video?
If you like, happy to.
So let's see.
There we go.
So it's just a giant eye that stares at things. Again, it was a motion tracking thing.
Yep.
This was using OpenCV and some Python running on a BeagleBone.
Okay.
And this actually had a webcam taped onto a 360-degree lens so it could see all the way around.
Press, yeah, thank you. Before it goes on.
Yeah, it could see all the way around, and it could it knew about blobs much better, so it could actually track an individual person and not be distracted by all the other people.
Okay.
This really arose. This was the beginning of me making inflatable things. Anton and I were in motorway services on the way back from a hacker festival in Holland, and we were talking about making eyeballs. We wanted to make a really big one.
Okay.
All right. And if you make a really big robot, you have to store it in your house, which is annoying.
Yeah.
And maybe we could make it inflatable, and it could be big and then later small. So I used the blower salvaged out of an old combi boiler.
Right.
Combi boilers have great blowers, by the way, very high static pressure because they're designed to run down a long pipe.
Okay.
The envelope is white ripstop nylon. I just made a pattern in Excel with baths and cut bits out and sewed them together. And then the thing inside it, let me find a picture of the insides. That's what's inside it.
Okay, so this is at the center of your inflatable orb.
Yes,
as it were.
So it's just a halogen light bulb, reasonably small light source. This is the disc that casts the shadow that is the pupil, and that runs back and forth on this little rail via a servo and a pulley.
Right.
So that makes the pupil, and then this blue thing makes the iris. And it actually, the pupil size changes depending on how interested it is. So
and how do you determine interest?
When it sees someone, it's like, oh, I'm interested.
Oh, I
and
see.
Nobody, it's like, I'm not interested in it. It's just kind of
okay.
But
that's brilliant.
It worked pretty well. It looks great. I mean, it's big, which makes anything better. It had the same kind of interaction as the little one. I mean, look, not as short because it worked better, really. But there's only so long people will be engaged with playing the game it has before they're kind of done with it. But it's great. Took it loads of places. Took it to a bunch of maker fairs and stuff. It was fun.
Yeah.
Doesn't boot anymore. Don't know why not.
Oh, that's a shame.
Well, computers.
It's the way projects go sometimes, isn't it? Okay. That's brilliant. And presumably, looking at that, it's almost entirely light bulb and servos. The project cost probably wasn't too huge.
Maybe £100.
Okay.
I mean, BeagleBone was. I think the BeagleBone was probably £60 then.
Yeah, took up most of the budget.
Yeah, maybe 150. Don't know, but it's mostly cheap stuff.
Yeah.
It was like it stands on an old drum stand that I scrounged off a musician friend. It's made from rubbish and nonsense as far as is possible. These were 3D prints off a very bad 3D printer that I made.
Right.
3D printers got good, but worked well enough.
Did the job, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking actually before the show about the wobble, the fact that it's not a perfectly designed piece of engineering, and how that sort of in some ways makes it more engaging, more relatable.
Yes, it gives its motion some kind of character. And the wobble is because you're not meant to put things with a high moment of inertia on a cheap servo, right? The servo control loop isn't built for it, but actually it's fine.
It enhances it more than anything in some ways.
Yeah. It gives it some character, something of its own that people like. That might be a segue into talking about Sketchy, actually.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So Sketchy was, I don't know where we are in the timeline.
Oh, just about 35 minutes in. Yeah.
Okay, so Sketchy was a Delta robot. Anton and I built this. You can't see the works there. Sorry.
It's okay.
There's 3 servos up there. Then these are bits of radio control shop stuff, all very cheap. It's a bent brass and so on. That's a brush pen, which is a pen which is also a brush.
Okay.
Important for these purposes because it has a very high Z tolerance. Like it will make a mark anywhere from sort of 0 to 6 millimeters.
Okay.
Towards the paper.
Interesting. Yeah. And so, what was the concept behind this project?
So this was it. There was a mobile phone app, which I wrote, which let you take a picture of somebody, and it kind of edge found the picture and vectorized it, and turned it into a simple set of vectors. Then it sent it to, I think, an Arduino Nano over Bluetooth,
right.
And it drew sketches of people.
Look at that.
There's one. That wasn't a super good example. Oh, and you have to excuse the weird square thing going on there. That was a bug. I fixed it after this video.
Okay.
Yeah, that was part of the calibration sequence, executing at the wrong height.
Oh, right.
I only had 750 bytes, I think, of RAM available to store the picture in the Nano. So there was a lot of work done in the phone to simplify the vectors.
Amazing.
And sometimes it drew quite good pictures.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
well, that one looks pretty good to me.
No, some of them really look like a person.
Oh, okay.
It sort of, people forgave it a lot, I think, because it didn't draw very precisely.
Right.
And in part, it didn't draw very precisely because servos are a bit terrible. It's not very accurate. And in part, it was because this whole frame is actually quite wobbly. And the motion control code set a limit on the acceleration it would use for going around the corners on the lines. And as you varied that, you can have more or less wobble. So if you turn the acceleration limit way up, you get very wobbly lines, very scribbly. And if you turn it right down, it's like, I am a plotter now. You could choose where in between you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So it gave it a lovely look. And, I spent a lot of time going to make affairs with this. And I would just, take a picture of somebody, it would draw it, give them the picture. Take a picture of the next person, it would draw it, give them the picture. It often had a cue. People were very interested by it.
Lovely. And that kind of the phone app, I guess, then did quite a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of taking the picture, processing the image, squeezing it down to the very restricted sort of size that you could deal with.
Yeah.
And that then sort of benefits significantly from your previous experience of that kind of world.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yes. I mean, you could have written it for a laptop if you wanted.
Yep.
It would have been the same really, but it was just handy for me. But again, this was stickier. People loved this more than I expected. And I think with this, it's because it gave them a thing that was sort of about them. Like they got a little bit of themselves, went through it somehow. And people liked that. But it was quite boring to run after a bit because you was doing the same thing over and over, the same conversation over and over.
Right.
It's all right, do it for a bit, and then it's boring.
Is it the sort of thing that you might, if you were to try and reproduce it or make a new one, you'd try and automate a bit more, so you have a I don't know, a booth that someone goes and sits in, pushes a button, and then out comes a picture of themselves. Is that sort of situation, or actually was it quite nice to be talking to people? And
it's nice to be talking to people until you've done too much of it, and then it's not.
right,
Okay. It's like Marmite. There's only so much Marmite you can have on a piece of bread. Somebody more energetic than me would probably have given it a paper feed,
right,
automated it more, but I'm too lazy.
Well, I think that's part of the charm in some ways, isn't it? That it is a bit of technology that needs the help, and it's not perfect, and everything else.
Yeah, and I think people see, even if they don't sort of call it out, I think they see when something is crude and simple, and they can see the works, and it's not trying too hard. I think that's actually often an appealing thing in technology, is that it isn't very good, it isn't very polished. You can see what's going on, you can engage with it, you can go, what's that bit? And it also, I think, makes it more like something somebody thinks they might make themselves, which I'm very much in favour of. So, even it's like if you make this all lovely, if you put injection molded casings around all the motors and everything, suddenly it looks like something that can only come from a factory.
And it's much less approachable for people as well. At that point, isn't it? It's as you say, they potentially could make it themselves. Whether or not they're going to is irrelevant, but the fact that it's sort of within their grasp of the technology or the I could factor.
Yeah, it's like you've shown them that it's possible that somebody like them could make something like this, which I'm very much in favour of. And so I guess I really made this badly out of laziness, and because I could get away with it. But I realised afterwards,
hang on a minute, I can spin this one.
it feels like something I'm really in favour of. That things should be made as badly as possible. For many purposes, they should not be made as well as possible, which is what people often aim for. They should be made as badly and quickly as possible. They should be the worst thing that might possibly work. And if that doesn't quite work, make it a little bit better until it just works. Unless it is actually part of a life support system, in which case, don't do that. But there's a lot of kind of pedagogical power in making things so you can see what's going on, and not spending labor to hide the details and to tuck the wires away and whatever.
Brilliant. I'm not sure if this is going to mean more to you than it does to me, but we've had a couple of messages now from Sam about toast. Hello, Sam. Thank you. I know that you two do a lot together. Is there
that's Sam making fun about toast.
Oh.
Shall I tell you about Sam?
Go for it. Why not?
All right. Yeah.
So, we've actually spoken with Sam before on the show. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I became friends with Sam, I don't know, some years ago when I offered him some unsolicited advice on drive systems for the Mammoth Beta organ, I think. And since then, I've made some things with Sam, which I can even show you a video. So
there we go. So we had a quick chat about AMS when we were talking with Sam a couple of weeks ago, I think.
Yes.
But we didn't see it or watch a video or anything. So please, I hope that's okay, Sam.
All right, that's enough of that. This is, I won't tell you a lot about it, but this is a modular synthesizer this is totally Sam's idea, but I helped him make a bunch of these things. A modular synthesizer where the modules make noise physically rather than electronically. So they're controlled electronically, but they make physical noise, and as far as possible, they're physical. So this thing here has a rotating turntable and a rangefinder, and you can put all kinds of things on it, and then it gives you a value which varies over time as the thing rotates.
Right.
So it's a bit like a sort of mechanical VCO,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Voltage controlled oscillator, just
Yeah.
for those. Yeah.
These bellows have a stepper motor in them, so they're controlled over control voltage and gate in the traditional way for a modular synthesizer module. But what they give you is air, so you give them more voltage, they go faster.
So these aren't actually necessarily whistles, but they produce air that you can use for other purposes.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
I'd misunderstood those. Yeah.
In, let's see, this thing, they're plugged into these flutes.
Yep.
Whereas here, sorry, stop that one. Here, I don't even know what they're plugged into.
Looks like a mouth organ and things there as well.
Yeah, some other stuff.
Yeah. I love it.
So yeah, that's the kind of thing I've been doing with Sam, where I've often added some robotics or electronics to an idea that Sam's already got to make something peculiar. So we're making modules that have solenoids that tap away at things, all kinds of modules and other non-modular things. But usually my job is a bit of electronics, a bit of software, usually on a little microcontroller. There's an Arduino Nano or a Teensy or something like that. And these are all aiming for things which are maximally fiddleable with.
Yep.
So like those bellows are designed so that you can press the bellows with your finger when you want to
interfere with them, and
everything has a lot of knobs. You can move things around dynamically. So as far as possible, control is out in the real world, not behind a screen.
Yeah.
Because everything is nicer when it's not behind a screen. Except you. I mean, you're behind a screen.
Oh.
In general, the effect of computing has been to make everybody virtualize everything and put it inside their computer.
Yep.
Which is great because it means you can have a thing you couldn't otherwise have, but it does mean the thing you have is basically more boring than a real one. And I think that effect is often underestimated.
Oh.
So there's a thing that my friend Libby and I invented called the Law of Thingness.
Just giving a bit of appreciation from Sam there.
Oh, thank you, Sam. So Libby for work was making things which are a bit like radios, but I mean, really, they were a Raspberry Pi and a speaker in a box. Right? But they did things that were a little bit like radio, but different. But they'd have a volume knob and some kind of tuning knob, except sometimes it did something like move you backwards and forwards in time, or all kinds of stuff.
Brilliant. Okay.
They made a whole platform for these things, and the thing that we realized was that you could do all those things. You could just write a program to do that. It'd be really easy. But what you get is not remotely as compelling as when you put it in a box with a knob and a hole for the sound to come out. It's just more engaging. It's more interesting. And I think there's something quite psychologically quite powerful in that, where we want to have the idea that things are for things. I think it's quite a deep human idea. Scissors are for scissoring. They just are.
Yep.
And we catalogue all these things around us by what they do, and we know what they're for. So if you promote some piece of functionality to be embedded in a physical thing, suddenly it hooks into all of that. So you make a thing physical instead of just a piece of software, and you make it more compelling and engaging in every way.
Yep.
Even if it does much less than it might if it was inside the computer.
I suppose there's also on the flip side, the reverse of that, where the computer is a thing that does so much. And if you take one of its functions and give it a physical home, then it, as you say, becomes much more important, real, than the less important sort of multi-purpose computer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you can still get done whatever you wanted to do with the computer if you want, but it doesn't fit in your head in the same way.
That's very interesting. Very good. Can we talk about some of the other projects we discussed earlier as well? So there's the one in particular I'd love, well, two in particular, the World of Techno and the Air Giants.
All right.
If we could.
So I'm going to do the tune on a stick briefly.
Sure, please do. Yeah.
So
we can hear your cat. Hope it's all right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all right. Jack thinks it's supper time.
Oh, difficult.
Oh, sorry. Let me turn the sound on. So this rotates continuously, has no speed control at all, and it plays a tune which is generative and based on where people are around it. Okay. And that's really all it does. Mm-hmm. It synthesizes kind of a little additional line to go with it. It picks MIDI patches at random to decide what sort of noise you're going to get. And I built it to leave in fields at hacker camps. I plug it into the mains and you leave it running. And people wander up to it and it plays a little tune at them. And sometimes you get people who work out what's going on and they'll stand around it and try to get a particular tune. Sometimes people will just wander past and like walk around it once or twice just to have a little interaction and then wander on. So it presents kind of a little game, not a very complex or abstract one, but it gives you this little thing to do which rewards you with music. So I built this with a friend, Phil, who knows a lot about generative music and told me many tricks so that what it plays is always kind of tunable. Okay. And I mean, it's easy enough to do. Right, the cat's come to have some opinions. It was more popular than I could have imagined. Just standing there in the dark, turning around, playing little tunes. Great. So that was that. I really like this musical generative thing, and somehow Julia and I ended up with the idea.
Sorry, just before we move on, is this presented as literally what you see there, or is there any kind of rules or guide or something?
No,
you put it there and walk off, and that's what it is, and people then have a play.
Yeah, and in my mind, instructions are failure. Okay. Yeah. Right? What you want is something that conveys what it does by what it does. Doesn't need anything else. Yep. I mean, that's what I like. It's a personal choice. That's what I like. So.
No, I approve of that. It's much more engaging as well because people figure it out, don't they? They spend time and energy to see what it is and what they can do to have an effect and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they feel it more deeply like that than if you told them a bunch of words first.
And they probably wouldn't read them anyway. So yeah, so. Great. Okay.
Right. So the World of Techno.
Yeah.
Here is a video of the World of Techno. That's the World of Techno. Brilliant. So it plays generative techno based on the GPS coordinates of its current location.
Okay.
So its slogan is a different tune for every square foot of the planet, which is about right. Right. So it gets its GPS location. It splits it up into a bunch of bit fields. It uses those to control various aspects of a script running in Sonic Pi. It's actually the Sonic Pi acid techno sample, just one of the samples that comes with it. But everywhere that had a choice or a randomizer in it, I just put in some bits from the GPS data.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll play this techno here, and then if you move it 5 feet, it'll play slightly different techno, and if you move it 5 more feet, other different techno. It really will play different techno if you move it 1 foot.
Yeah.
And it does have instructions on the top. It says, "Please take the art for a walk."
I love it.
That's it.
Nice.
it's got a handle and wheels, so it's obviously made to be pushed along. And what we do with it is, take it to a hacker camp, leave it somewhere, usually in the middle of the path, wander off. That's it.
So it's self-powered. It's got a speaker,
battery, speaker,
and you just you plonk it down somewhere and wander off, leave it to its life.
Yeah,
and people play with it.
Yeah, you hear it like you're sitting in a talk or something, and you just hear it. It's quite distinctive after a bit. You learn the techno.
Yeah.
And I put a sticker on it with where I'm camped.
Okay.
And an email address, and somebody brings it back when it's flat. Usually.
Nice.
Sometimes it's a bit broken.
Yeah.
It's a couple of times like a wheel has fallen off and we had to bodge it back on, or somebody bodged it back on and then brought it back.
Okay.
Sometimes people open it up and charge it when it's flat. A couple of times it's come back with different techno because it's not secure in any way at all.
And that's part of the point of the project, or is that sort of a little bit frustrating, or how does that sit with you?
It's part of abandoning something to the care of the people that find it.
Yeah.
They'll do whatever they find appropriate. It went to the most recent Dutch Hacker Fest, MCH. I didn't go because I was too busy, but a friend took it, and somebody opened it up, changed it to play some 8-bit Mario music continuously, which fine. And then somebody else sort of wandered off with it while they were still thinking about it. Apparently they planned to change it back, but they couldn't because somebody had wandered off with it.
No.
Very sorry, it changed it. This is how you fix it.
I love it.
Somebody fixed it. So again, there were really some lessons for me in that. Like, one was you really can abandon things. Right? People will be nice if you've made the game, the experience you're offering clear enough. People will want to go along with it, and people are generally just lovely. I mean, generally people are lovely. A small percentage are not. There's always a risk somebody will throw it in a lake.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll make another one. Didn't cost very much.
Okay.
Didn't take very long. Maybe 100 quid. Don't know. Battery, Raspberry Pi, some wheels, speakers from a charity shop. 10 quid for an audio amp. 30 quid for a GPS. It's not very much compared to the amount of fun it's been.
Yeah.
And I think there's a caution that you get making technology. You always think, can people use this wrong? Can this protocol be gamed? Can people somehow exploit this thing, which is necessary for something which has to be reliable in the face of 100,000 people?
Yep.
But absolutely not necessary in a friendly camp of 5,000 hackers.
And actually, as we've said, it kind of being able to do things that you shouldn't, in inverted commas, shouldn't be able to do, actually enhances the experience again, doesn't it? It's and people like things that trust them. They like that because who wouldn't? So I think just that thing of making things intended to be abandoned to the care of others is a whole powerful theme which I would like to do more with. I really like it. We spoke with Sam again a couple of weeks ago, and the what was it called? Sonic graffiti, I think is what you called it, Sam.
Yes.
And that was fantastic. I love it. And again, it's about putting something out there which is sort of for the care of others almost, isn't it? And see what happens.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And there's also something there about the power of cheapness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't put your finest audio stuff that you could ever make in a hole in the wall and leave it there for 5 years.
Yep.
But something that cost you a tenner, you easily would.
Why not?
And should. So
definitely. Great. We're kind of nearly at the hour mark. Are you happy to carry on for a little bit, and we'll talk about the air giants quickly?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about them.
All right. So this is a story. So during the time I was doing things with Rusty Squid, I played with little inflated systems. Here's a video of one of them. So I actually saw a project called Aeromorph, which was an MIT thing using CNC heat sealing and fabric. And I thought, maybe I should have a go at that. It looks like fun.
Mm-hmm.
This was made just by heat sealing a coated fabric together with a soldering iron.
Okay.
Bit of glue gun to stiffen it up the middle. So that's just two chambers being inflated alternately.
As in the left chamber and the right chamber as a tube, effectively. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I thought, oh, that's interesting. To make these peculiar robotic things. And I'll abbreviate the story, I think, quite a lot.
Okay.
But I ended up making, let's see, show you the tentacle. Oh, there's Robert. Had some help from Robert making this. So this has so there's no hard structure in there. That's all inflated and actuated by air. So it has a blower which runs continuously. It has some valves which were complicated laser cut constructions, and then a system of many large pipes. And it has rangefinders on the sides, which are those little black things you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And it will play, when it sees somebody, it will either play chase or try and run away from them, or it will try and catch them, one or the other, kind of at random. Otherwise, it just wiggles about. It worked far better than I expected. Like, it could hold itself up. It was quite mobile and strong enough. And people were very engaged with it. Quite a lot of people saw it as a live thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I told them to, but they saw, sometimes they saw this end as a head, sometimes they saw it as a tail. They often got the game that it was offering and went along with it. Sometimes they just wanted to lie on it and squish it.
Okay.
So yeah, I was greatly encouraged by that. Then next up, I guess, was the Triffid.
Just quickly on this one, the construction, you've got pockets sort of opposing each other, which give you the flexibility. Was the whole central column effectively then just one large pocket which inflated and gave it the sort of the main structure? Is that kind of how you went about it?
Yeah. So it's effectively a series of bones down the middle with these pockets driving it back and forth at the joints.
Yeah. Okay. And then the blower and things, presumably that's similar to a bouncy castle, or maybe a bit smaller.
It's actually a small bouncy castle blower.
Okay, brilliant.
Off eBay.
Yeah.
Not a very good one.
Very nice.
They're all very noisy. So yes, so I was showing that at a little art show in Bristol.
Yeah.
Because when you make things like that, you need to put them with people to even understand what you've done.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
It might work technically, but if it doesn't work socially, it's pointless. So let me show you the Triffid.
Yes.
So the Triffid was actually sponsored by EMF Camp.
Okay.
So they paid for all the materials, which was great. Otherwise, it wouldn't have got made. And so this is a 5 or 6 meters tall, quite mobile and flexible.
Yeah.
Again, bouncy castle blower and valves. Valves like that.
Okay, so that's to regulate. Oh, I see. Is that actually under control of the system? It can deflate itself by opening the valve and close it up to pump itself up again, kind of thing.
Yes, and so the curve is governed by balancing the pressures.
I see.
Inside various compartments.
And
then that really is what got us to Air Giants. So I'd made these things with help from the EMF camp and so on, basically in my own time because I wanted to. And then there was a grant scheme called the Southwest Creativity Network, which was intended to start new creative tech companies in the Southwest. And we applied. Robert and Emma and I were all interested in doing something more with this. I met Robert in a field in Holland. I met Emma working at Rusty Squid. We shared a lot of interests, but also different backgrounds, so we worked very well together. So we applied for it and we got a grant, and that really got us started. So we made Luma. Well, first of all, we spent about 6 months just inflating things and laughing
what
and
works?
swearing. Just making new principles, really, for how to make things move with air and fabric, which is not much studied. I mean, people really don't. People make a lot of marvelous fixed stage inflatables, but there's very little moving inflatable, and when you do see it, it's usually people pulling on strings rather than something that is operated by the air.
Okay.
So we spent months experimenting with that and learning stuff, and that culminated in making Luma, which is a kind of giant snail creature.
Was that Luma, as in
Luma?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll show you a video.
Oh yes, please do.
I've got YouTube right here.
Oh,
stupid
good for adverts.
Sorry. Here's Luma. Luma worked very well. We've shown Luma to thousands of people by now. And Luma is really a giant puppet. Somebody's puppeting all the time. So it has somewhat different principles from the previous things.
Yeah, I can't quite figure out what's going on to make it move at the moment.
Well, that's fine.
That's brilliant.
No, it's air and chambers.
Yep.
It's always air and chambers. These things light beautifully.
They really do.
It's and again, people are very happy to see Luma as kind of alive. They want to go and say hello. They want to give a little stroke on the head. And we're very happy with that. That kind of immediate empathy is lovely to see. So we made Luma. We've toured Luma a bunch. We've toured a few other things. Our latest work is Unfurl, which is a whole garden of things. So Unfurl is
oh wow,
some things a little bit like the Triffid.
Yep.
Different shape. We get a different kind of quality of motion. Some big arch things. Some ferns that roll and unroll.
These are brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
So good.
And these are all autonomous, so they have LiDAR. They know where people are, and they're responding to people.
Okay.
But interestingly, people will often make up these games. They will be tickling or gesticulating, or they're not really concerned with whether it's true or not, but they're playing a game that they're having this communication with it, and it kind of is working well enough that they're happy with it. It's just very lovely, and we see all kinds of lovely interactions. So yeah, we will be running Unfurl at Greenwich and Docklands International Festival in a park in Bethnal Green on the 8th of September. If you're in Bethnal Green, come and visit. And we'll be touring these things in a whole bunch of other places. It turns out if you make giant robots, you have to take them places.
Is there a lot of sort of explaining how it works and what goes on, or do you tend to try and disappear once it's up and not share the secrets, as it were? Let it to people's own imagination and figuring out and things.
It's the experience that we're aiming for is sort of very simple and joyful and visceral. So if somebody wants to know how it works, we're very happy to explain.
Okay.
Very happy to talk about it, but that's not the point, really.
Yes, yeah.
The point is to see these things, and if it's working as we would hope it is, to feel like you're in the presence of weird giant corals, and they're kind of saying hello.
Yeah.
And you don't have to talk to do that.
No.
So the less talking, the better.
Yeah. And we've seen the last few have been quite lit up and illuminated. Does that make them a nighttime or a dark space thing, or is it something that works in daylight and stuff as well? Okay.
They work in daylight as well. The interaction is really the same in daylight.
Okay.
But you just get this visual impact when it's dark.
Yeah.
Which is very lovely. So some of our gigs are just nighttime. Some of them are day into night.
Right.
We are very happy with both, really.
Okay. Fantastic. The construction, is that sort of sewn fabrics? Is it heat again, or is it?
No, it's
more complex?
Just sewn. Because the actuation uses up a lot of air, so we don't care about leaks.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, literally, sometimes they've had holes in them that you put your fist in, and that doesn't really make a difference.
Okay.
So it's sewn fabric. Valves which we make, they have electronics distributed through them, so they have little nodes which we manufacture, running the many chambers, so there's lots of pressure sensing and valve actuation going on, and then the nodes are all networked up, and then there's one of the nodes is doing the behavior, and there's some communication between them as well, so if they're all bored and you excite one of them, the others will pick up on it. So inside, there's just a lot of C and wires, LEDs, just like with anything, really.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's lovely to see it and talk to you about it.
Thank you. It's a lovely position to be in. We can just make up strange things we find marvelous and take that and show them to people. I feel very happy. But it's interesting how long and tortuous a story it is to get to this point. It's like when you make a thing and somebody goes, "Oh, that's good, you should do that for a living." Yeah, that's great. But actually, it's quite a tale of trying some things and playing with things, just noodling with stuff, with no idea it might ever turn into anything, and meeting people who will later be vital allies, and then sometimes the bits all go together.
A lot of luck. Yeah.
A lot of luck, and I think a lot of just being open to random stuff.
Yeah. So is Air Giants your full-time job at the moment? Is that what occupies you, or are you doing other things as well?
Air Giants is basically full-time. I have really 4 jobs.
Right.
But Air Giants is by far the most substantial one.
Okay.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Looks great. Well done.
Thank you.
Very good. I think we're kind of at the end then. Is there anything else you'd like to say or shout out or sort of mention quickly?
I mean, thanks to Rusty Squid, thanks to EMF for initial sponsorship, thanks to Swipton for the grant that got us going, thanks to Without Walls, who are an outdoor arts consortium that commissioned Unfurl, because without things like that we can't make that stuff. But yeah, thanks to all the people making weird robots.
Yeah, fantastic. Very good. Well, just quickly before we go then, next week we'll be talking with Jana Marie Hemsing about various electronics projects. But otherwise, it's goodbye from us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.